My name is Andrew Poe, and I am the children's pastor at Covenant Church, and I wanted to welcome you tonight to this Parenting in a Pandemic. And I just want to introduce you. We have Frank and Mary here tonight. I'll let them introduce you. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I'm Frank. I'm the student ministry director here at Covenant.
And I'm Mary Elsinga. I'm Director of Women's Ministries, and I'm happy to be with you tonight.
And just so you know a little bit about each one of us, I personally have 3 children, a 14-year-old, 11-year-old, and a 7-year-old. And so right now we are all here at my house and doing the distance learning thing, and we are just basically hunkered down here and trying to get through this time. And so that is why we were actually decided, Mary and Frank and I decided this would be a good opportunity as we were discussing things, thinking about what it means to be in this time period, an unusual time in our history, that this was a good opportunity to share with you some of our thoughts about what it means to parent in a pandemic. So we were thinking about basically 3 or 4 different categories or ideas that we wanted to share with you and talk a little bit about basically amongst ourselves, from the idea of what it means to maintain sanity, just general sanity during this time. As we know, this is a bit of craziness, and having to basically pull out of everything and be at home all the time it can test everyone's sanity. And then we're going to look at a little bit with anxiety and depression as being kind of 2 areas where we definitely have seen a rise or concern. And then finally, we're just going to look at healthy habits, both now and as we move outward. So to begin us, I thought we'd just start talking, and hopefully you can glean some things from us. We are not at all professionals. We are not the people who have the expertise when it comes to psychology and stuff. But what we do want to hopefully share with you is just our hearts, what we believe the scripture talks about, and then point you to the right direction, point you to where we think will be best for you if you do need extra help. But just know that we're here for you, and we want this to be an opportunity for you to hear us, to gain some support, and hopefully walk away with some ideas that maybe you can implement in your household. So to get us started, we're just going to think about what it means for you as the parents, first and foremost, of how you're handling the situation. Right, Mary?
Right, Andrew. Well, actually, when we were talking about this, Andrew said, since we're talking about sanity, I'm going to have you start with that because you're the most insane person I know. So here I am. But, when we started thinking about this, I thought we need to separate the parenting aspect from the adults, because first we need to be sure that we as adults in our family circumstances are holding on okay, because if we're not, the ship is going down. Andrew told you that he's got his family there. I am on the other side of that. I'm an empty nester, and but we do have one of our adult children who is quarantining here at home with us because she lives in Manhattan, and so we wanted her out of the hotspot. And that's been really interesting because when you've lived away from your children for a long time, and probably she would say, boy, when you've lived away from your parents a long time, to suddenly be back together and be trapped in a home together is an experience. And so she would probably give you a different side to this than I'm going to. But I came across something the other day, and I thought this was a wonderful way to just kind of begin. I'm going to read it to you. It's called Yes and it said, yes, we can feel grateful and disappointed about things being canceled. Yes, we can enjoy extra time with loved ones and feel overwhelmed by their presence. Yes, we can be hopeful and feel like everything is falling apart around us. And the last one is, yes, we can be a source of support for others and prioritize our needs and fill our own cup at the same time. And, when I read that, I just thought that's a perfect balance, because I think we have to recognize that this is uncharted territory for all of us, not just for kids, but for us as adults. And it's a little bit overwhelming. So I think before we even address the kids and the teenagers, we got to make sure that we know what's going on in our own heads. And I just jotted down a couple of notes probably the first thing I would say is be careful where you get your facts. Like, stop looking at social media and talking to just your random people on the street to get your information. Be well informed with the accurate and correct factual information. So, the CDC, the NIH, you can go to pa.gov to find out stuff specific to our area. And that is where I think we should start, is make sure we have accurate information. The next thing would be for those of us that are now working in the home is to kind of set different priorities. When you go off to work, you get to kind of draw a line of demarcation. And now you're in a place where everything kind of just flows one to the other. So set some new priorities for yourself, and also give yourself a different assessment tool. Like, don't expect that you're going to be as productive here as you were when you were away from everything else going on in your family. Set some time for fun. Get up, move around, take a break in the middle of the day, be active. And I am preaching to the choir because I've really struggled to do this. I find that I'm sitting too much. I'm not getting out. I got to force myself to just break away from what I need to do. And then make sure that you keep a check on where you are emotionally. Because there are times when I would bet the three of us would say, this whole thing has just sort of imploded on us. And sometimes when you're trying to be the strongest person in the room, you just keep stuffing your emotions. And what I know about stuffing emotions is the longer you stuff it, the bigger the blow. And so you really want to be careful to address kind of where you're at if you're feeling sad, or if you're missing people, or if you're grieving things. We have to own those things, because when we own them and our kids see us own them, it gives them permission to own those areas of life too. So those are just some of the kind of starter points that I think for us as the leaders in the ship. When you go on a plane, they tell you, put your mask on first before you adjust your children's. I guess that's what we're asking you to do, is make sure you're adjusted before you try to help your kids.
Yeah, I think that's huge in terms of giving us the right perspective and expectations, because it's easy so much, Mary, to suddenly, even though we're in this crisis situation, to still have these unreasonable expectations, and again, you mentioned the social media. You can easily get sucked into social media and see and compare, and may think, oh, so-and-so has just the perfect life right now, or they're able to get all their schoolwork done and their kids are doing all these creative projects or things like that. And what happens is you just build up your own sense of self-worth. You start feeling like you're not doing enough, and then guilt can easily creep in, and that just becomes more and more of a snowball effect, right? And then you're not even able to start thinking about how do you help your children if you are not in the right frame of mind, and so forth.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of sanity, I think what we want to talk about too is just like with children, now this is the first time where parents are kind of a lead figure in caring for their children all day, as well as doing their schoolwork. And again, most of them are doing some kind of their own work. And how do you balance all of that? And I came up with just 3 R's I thought were helpful. First was the routine. So if you haven't yet, I know this has been about 6 weeks, it's still hard maybe, and sometimes this is something that you don't want to feel like you have to do a hard and fast rule about it, but a routine is always helpful for children, especially getting up yourself, making sure you're not in your pajamas, but then also giving the children that sense of routine of we're getting up, we're going to school, even if school is just down at the kitchen table. Trying to make that same every morning, keeping that consistent. Then to have times to relax. So again, talking humor, talking getting outside, talking activities and exercises is just a crucial part to, I think, having that healthier mentality. And then building relationships. So this is a unique time in our history where we are together so often that it's easy either to fall into a trap of taking each other for granted and not utilizing this time, or on the other extreme, feeling like we have to be together all the time, and if we're not that perfect family, we're not getting along, we feel guilty, like we should be happy, we should be getting along, this is an opportunity. So I just think the routine, being able to relax and building those relationships are key to kind of beginning that sense of sanity in your household. Frank, did you have any thoughts in terms of, even with students, what that could look like?
Yeah, I think, all those things are very applicable to students, and that's some of the things I was thinking about. Routine's really important. Maybe some additional things which could be helpful is just prioritizing fun. I think, fun can be such a stress relief. It can get you a laugh. It can get you to kind of bond in a different way. So it's not bad to prioritize maybe a part of the day when you're just going to do something fun together, something as a family or something with a specific child. I think that could be really, really helpful. Another thing I was thinking about too is, trying to find purpose in the pause. Like if we could figure out how to help our students or children kind of find something that maybe they like to do and maybe they have more time to do now, I think that would be really beneficial, whether it's a hobby, art, learning something new. I think having something to look forward to or something new to explore can also help just with some sanity and some of that in a home.
Yeah, absolutely. Funny you say that. I mean, I was just talking to a dad the other day, and his son wanted to build a pinball machine. And so his dad found this on YouTube, of course, and he is handy already, but they kind of made it a joint project where he's even like, this is something that maybe, my grandkids get, kind of thing. And, I'm not a handy person, so I don't have the tools to do that, but I painted the bathroom and, included my daughter. We did it together, like just using opportunities that fit your family, your personality. I mean, I like to read to the children a lot, so we take a break in the middle of the day, we read the story, they love to hear that. So you're just using the time, again, like prioritizing some things that are, not academic, not something that we feel like we have to do, but just as fun, and make it something that even the kids can create or think of or do. I saw posted somebody doing like everybody come to dinner dressed as something like you would be for, a party or something. You just create some opportunities for kids and make it fun, even though you may not do that on a regular basis. I think that's huge.
Well, and Andrew, I was thinking that the whole idea in Scripture we read in Ecclesiastes that for everything there is a season, right? I know that right now we have all got to feel like, when is this going to end? And we can focus on that aspect of it, or we can kind of flip our perspective to say, are we going to see this and focus on this as being an inconvenience or an interruption? Or are we going to flip it around and see it as an invitation, right? We know that this is only going to be for a period of time. And if anybody watched Pastor Bruce talk about time on his devotional, we talked about, in the moment, it seems like forever. But once you get beyond it, you recognize it was just a moment in time. And so if there's a way to kind of remind ourselves and our families that this really isn't going to be forever. And I have this little line that I've always said since I was a kid. I don't even know where it came from, but I always go, in the scope of all eternity, this is just a moment. And so if you can find some way to make that a reality, it doesn't seem quite so foreboding.
Right. And also to really use this opportunity as the time given to us. I'm reminded in, Colossians about putting on then as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and if one another has a complaint against another, which I'm sure never happens in any family, forgiving each other, just as the Lord has forgiven you. And then above all, put on love, which binds us together. And then, of course, let the peace of Christ rule in our hearts. And I think, you just take those words and you just realize those, if we have those as the forefront of our minds, what it means to really live in grace, we just need an extra measure of grace right now, then to, bear with one another with patience, with love, and then let the peace of Christ to rule our hearts, that then will hopefully overflow into these relationships. And if we're consistently thinking about how do we live that out, resting in Christ, not relying totally on our own self, but recognizing those moments when we do need to make those conscious decisions. A choice has to be made at different times. Am I going to blow up, or do I need to step back? How am I going to resolve this conflict, either with my spouse or with my child? I think all of those things just need to be bathed in grace in our situation, especially.
When we mess up, right? The idea to say, all right, I got to man up, or I got to woman up, and ask for forgiveness in that, because we all have the capacity at the drop of a hat to be very, very human, right? And so we're going to fail in some of these things, but to just acknowledge that, geez, I'm sorry. I should not have done that. I should have not reacted that way.
Yeah, and just also acknowledge this is a pressure cooker, right? This is a time in history where any little thing is going to be blown into a bigger thing, because we are just, 24/7 living in the same house. There's no outlet to go to the mall, to go to, anywhere. So you're stuck. And I think that's just going to be the compounding factor is, okay, where we may have shown patience before and we thought we were doing a good job, this is going to be the time that's just, we're going to be tested in a whole new way. So yeah, I think that should bring us a little bit more into, okay, pressure cooker. We have these thoughts, these feelings, and already these struggles, but I think the two big ones that we have been seeing with kids have to do with anxiety and depression. So I think, Frank, you could share a little bit about what you've seen in that realm and what you would recommend, especially for children or teenagers to face that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I've walked through a lot of parents and students through just dealing with anxiety or depression, and definitely in this time period it has been heightened just because of the isolation and the worry and the break in routine. Definitely students who have already experiencing that, or children, are going to experience those things more. I think one thing to do is to really help try to identify, what is my child or student really going through. And one thing that was helpful to me as I did a lot of research on this the last several years, trying to understand the difference between stress or having real things of anxiety or depression. And for what I found out, which was amazing, because I was like, this makes so much sense, is that, like, when we're talking about stress, we're talking about something specific, like a reaction to an actual situation. So whether they have a test, an AP test, and they're stressed about it, that's normal and that's healthy, because it helps us be able to accomplish things that maybe we couldn't do otherwise. It's a natural thing in our body. But more anxiety and depression is more looking at all of life. Like, everything's overwhelming me, or everything is making me anxious. There's no pinpoint it. It kind of is this general reaction to the world. And I think that's really helpful to be able to understand, like, hey, my child is really, they're just stressed in this season, or they're stressed about this specific thing, or they're really dealing with some anxious thoughts or depression maybe in this season. And it can manifest itself in different ways, whether it's emotional changes in their behavior, or even some cognitive changes, like just not wanting to try, not wanting to do their schoolwork, not wanting to get up out of bed. So those are some, like, warning signs if you see those things, that maybe your student is dealing with anxiety or depression. And I would say the most helpful thing through all my interactions with students and parents is just asking questions. So many students just, they sit there and they're not going to share their feelings with you, but maybe if you ask a question or prompt them, they might be willing to have that conversation with you. And the more specific a question you can ask, the more likely you'll probably get an answer. Whereas, have you been sleeping well lately? Like, are you getting enough rest? Or maybe it's asking, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, like, how are you feeling? Like, are you feeling anxious? Some of those conversation starters can be really helpful in just trying to start that conversation and see if your student is or child is experiencing any of those things. And the one last thing I would recommend that that has been really helpful even in my own life as I deal with anxiety, but other students' lives as well, is that passage in 2 Corinthians 10:5. And it's something I have just kept meditating and thinking on, especially the last couple of years. It says, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. And so one thing I've always encouraged people to do is try to capture these thoughts that maybe make us anxious or sad and to really make them obedient to Christ. Like, turn them around and think about the truth of who God is and how he's involved in our lives. So the 3 big things I encourage students to do is to name the what. Like, what is bothering you? Like, what is causing this anxiety or stress? What's that specific thing? Next is the why. Like, talk about it. So have them explain, why does this bother you? Why is this maybe coming up in your life right now? Why is this making you anxious? And the final step, and almost the most important step, is the who. Like, change their focus. Help them from focusing on these anxious or sad thoughts and to really trust God in his role in it. So that's always so helpful to be able to say, hey, I feel alone, but the truth is, if I trust in Jesus, I'm never alone. There is a God who loves me, who cares for me. So I usually try to encourage students to even attach scripture to that truth. So when they get those anxious or depressed thoughts, they can remind themselves of God's truth and what he says about them, how he's involved in that situation. That doesn't always fix everything. And sometimes, they need some counseling or additional resources, but that's just a simple way to try to help in everyday life when dealing with that. So I hope that's helpful.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to that for just a second, because I think, Frank, all of those tips are ones that we need to apply to ourselves, right? To try to name it, to identify kind of what's the root cause of it. And one of the things that I've encouraged a lot of families to do, because sometimes kids are they don't want to be put on the spot to answer. I think the question thing is perfect. But I found when we were parenting our kids, getting in the car and going for a drive, because if I have to talk to you and I don't have to look at you, sometimes it's easier. The other thing that we used to do is give everybody a journal and say, jot down your questions. Like, this is a nobody's going to critique it zone. So what I want here is just, what are the questions you have? What are you mad about? What do you wish would happen to the sibling that's sitting right next to you? Or just someplace to get those feelings out. And my connection with each child was always, I get to read whatever's in that. My promise to you is that will never be something that I use to come at you, but it is something to just inform my mind and heart as to what's going on for you at this particular point in time in your life. So all of those things apply for adults as well as for students.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, go right ahead.
Okay. Well, I think too is every child will be different. Every student will be different. So what might work for one may not work for another. So don't be discouraged if asking questions for one makes more sense and giving a journal to another makes other sense. You kind of have to feel it out. I think every student and child seems to be different in the way they react to expressing their feelings about what's going on in their life.
Yeah, no, I was just going to piggyback and just say, and sometimes even using that journal as a means of communication. You let the child write something knowing that mom or dad will read it, and then mom and dad will respond to it without kind of any judgment or that kind of feeling, but just a safe response, even if it's I'm praying for you, I understand what you're saying, anything that just kind of gives that communication another opportunity to happen. I think that's great.
Yeah.
And then I think that connects very easily to anxiety. With children, I think I've seen a lot where, I even have a child who gets a little more anxious, and it usually happens at nighttime, not being able to settle down, or when she's trying to, that's when all the thoughts kind of come in. And, I researched a little bit about anxiety in terms of it's actually that sense of a physical change in one's body where you are feeling like a fight-flight mode. And even if the anxiety, the root of it is not reality, your body is responding like it is. And so your palpitations, your heart, your emotions all get connected into that. And so how to even begin addressing the physical, where you're deep breathing or you're just figuring out calming exercises, And when I watched a video on that, they even suggested doing deep breathing exercises when you're fine, when you don't have an episode of being anxious, to then be prepared. So like as a parent, we even at a, we sit down for dinner, and sometimes there's just that moment where the kids are, a little bit crazy, or we're not settled, and I do like, hey, everyone needs to take a deep breath, and we just need to use that as a calming down moment. And then when it's really an opportunity, like at night or something, where there's more of an anxious mode, that can help as well. And then, like Frank was saying, replacing thoughts. Always, you don't want to just try and tell a kid stop doing that. You never can really just do that. You have to have something to replace. And so one of the big things I think is a great tool against anxiety as well as depression is gratitude. And you just start down the road of seeing how we are thankful for certain things, or we then begin to see the positives in life, and we thank the Lord for those good things. I think that is one small tool, again, that can help to combat those anxious thoughts or those depressing thoughts, and kind of turn a person around a little bit more.
We used to have a jar that we kept on our table, and you could certainly flip it into any of these categories. And in the jar were questions, and everyone would have to go around the table, pull out a thing out of the jar, and it could be name something you're thankful for. It could be name something you're afraid of, name something that's worrying you, name something that you'd like to do. So you could incorporate some of these different areas that we're touching on and come up with those questions, put them in the jar, and then it becomes a space where no one's afraid because everyone is participating with it. And you're beginning to, and if we're a family and Andrew pulls out something that he's afraid of, it's sort of, I can piggyback off of that and say, oh yeah, I'm worried about that too, or that's been something that's been bothering me. And so you might find that that's a real helpful and natural way for the conversation to just unfold at the dinner table in a non-threatening way, but to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly going on in all of your lives.
And then use that even, I think the dinner table is also an awesome opportunity. That's where we do our family devotions. I think that leads right into that kind of sense of, the children participating and reading. We use a certain devotional book, but I was just thinking about the verse when we're talking all about this is from 1 Peter, where it says, humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. So I think, just using the scriptures, using devotionals, praying for one another, giving the children an opportunity to pray. I'm sure teenagers don't like to be put on the spot, but still being asked to pray, or being brought into the family, into that sense that you are part of this family, part of the conversation. How are you processing this? And have you talked about all of these things even with the Lord? I think that's a great kind of connecting point. So.
Yeah, and I would just say don't be discouraged. Just start somewhere, even if you haven't had conversations before, because even though I always tell our small group leaders when they ask questions to students and don't respond, it at least communicates how much you care. So don't be discouraged. Developmentally, as they get older, they do lean back away from sharing their feelings sometimes with their families. So you're not alone, and it's not you, and just keep trying. And we're here to help too.
Yeah, pursuing them regardless. It may even be that they push back or get angry or whatever, but I think every child, student, no matter what, even adults, if you are pursuing them in love, even if they push back, I think they know you care and you love. And if you're doing it with that heart motivation, they're going to hear that.
Yeah. I was thinking as we were talking that the whole idea of anxiety and stress and emotional, mental health issues or emotional issues, they're harder to see because if I came to the dinner table and my finger was broken and it was bleeding, everybody would be like, oh my gosh, we got to help you. Somebody stop the bleeding. And, oh, I'm so sorry. Let me help you. But emotional and mental things are kind of hidden away. They're tucked away for us. And they're on the same level, really, as physical ailments, in that they need to be addressed, and they 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 take some time to heal, and they require some specific attention, whether it's the level of stress or anxiety or deep depression. And so we really want to encourage you to um, look with eyes wide open. And I know that there are lots of places out there that will come alongside you. There are certainly online sites. The American Bible Society has some really good things for families dealing with issues. There are websites through Psychology Today, Christianity Today, Andrew, CCEF, the counseling organization close by us. Those are all places where you can find people who will step alongside to help you, but it requires, it's not always a quick fix. So you want to look, and when you recognize that there's a limp, or someone's getting a little bit more quiet, begin at that point to start trying to peel the layers away, so it doesn't become an ICU event, right? It's just something that you can talk about and help the person involved, and that person involved could be yourself. So just be looking broad to see how we can help to heal both the physical, if there is, but certainly the emotional and mental aspects of stress caused by what we're all going through.
Yeah. I think, the CCEF, Christian Counseling and Education Foundation, that has a great website, even a whole section geared towards the pandemic, and just resources about anxiety and parenting even, and things like that, but even for your personal, how do you deal with that? So it's, we're hopefully, if you're watching this, we're going to post some of those resources and have that available for you, and just know that we, of course, would be happy to talk with you as well. But, and then, I think this is a good opportunity to even talk about that there will be even, some of you listening will be people who may just be in that same kind of situation where you're managing this craziness, you're feeling like my child is getting a little more rebellious or upset, and how to calm them down and all those kinds of situations. But if you do find yourself even more in an unsafe or an unhealthy environment, that you requires more than just listening to a parenting talk, then we want to be able to at least be there for you. I know, Mary, you had found even some information more about that. Do you want to share?
Well, I think that this social distancing has sometimes people can feel socially isolated, right? And so what we want is to demystify that. We don't want you to feel alone if you're going through hard times, if you are in a relationship that maybe has become toxic or abusive, verbally or physically, or if there are issues like that playing out within your family. We want you to be able to connect with a community that will walk alongside you, both professionally and relationally. There have been all sorts of things out there on social media and in print even that say, because we're doing so much screen time, right? It's hard to share with somebody the intimate struggles that you might be going through. And so you got to come up with some creative ways to communicate with the people that are on the other side of the screen that you need a little extra help. So it could be a hand signal, it could be something, and maybe within your circle of friends, you talk about it and you make that specific signal. We're going to put on our with our resources, there are a couple of very specific things. If you are maybe in an abusive situation, if there are specific hand signals that you can do online so that other people know, and we'll post that so everybody knows, and you're not feeling like I'm the only one aware of that. But I think those are really essential things, because again, we don't want either children or students or even the adults engaged in this to feel isolated. We are separated, but we don't want you isolated.
Very true. Absolutely. So kind of leading out of that, I think, again, we are talking about the bigger picture of just sanity and how do we cope within this season as a family, and love and forgiveness, definitely, and the communication, building the relationships. And then we just talk, more specifically the anxiety and depression, which can lead into even an unsafe environment. But now we're going to look at just healthy habits and things that we want to start doing now. As they often say, it takes like 3 weeks or so many days, 30 times to do something to develop a habit. We've all been in that situation right now, and we've all developed some kind of habit. So it depends on what kind of habits you're actually developing. But we want to just talk about what that looks like now, developing those healthy habits now, because I think the biggest things out there are, when we are isolated. I think even Pastor Bob mentioned that, what do we turn to when we don't have the friends? We turn to food. We turn to other things like Netflix for, 24-hour series or something. Yeah, what are some things that you've seen, Frank, about just developing some healthy habits or bad habits that we need to change?
Wait, but before you answer that, what are some of the unhealthy habits or habits you guys have all developed?
Nothing, Mary. I'm totally fine.
Andrew, you go first.
Well, I do say, certainly our Netflix and, TV watching is certainly higher. I actually, I think when this all started too, I'm not a huge Facebook person, but when this happened and you're feeling isolated, I think that rose in my book. I just started doing it more, to the point where just literally last week I had to say, I need to stop again, to just keep a little bit more of a distance, to just use Facebook as my go-to. So, it's not bad to look at every once in a while, but, I felt like there was this rise of this need to be connected. And now I feel like, wait, that's not necessary as much. Maybe I need to pick up a book versus looking at Facebook or something. But yeah, I think those are the bad habits I think I was seeing.
I think for me, it's probably two things primarily. One being definitely not eating the right food, I would say. I was meal prepping right before all this. I was doing really good, and then the pandemic hit. So maybe choice of food is probably one of them. The second probably is just like my boundaries of work and kind of what I'm doing at home. Like I do find myself working really late at night, or, just all these weird hours, and even sometimes longer. So I think that balance has been kind of just changed because I'm in a whole new situation. Those are probably my two big things.
Well, and I think I found that I haven't really given it thought, because, when I had a routine, I just did my routine, and now I'm just doing. And if there's nothing to do, then I guess I got nothing to think about. I don't know. So I'm way too lackadaisical about saying, all right, exercise, and don't snack, or whatever the things need to be. I have a tendency to get a little mindless. And so, developing some good healthy habits that force us to think that through is probably really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So now back to you, Frank.
I don't know. After I admitted that, I don't know what to share. No, just kidding. I think some of the healthy habits, at least for students or families, could do is obviously spending time together, like intentional time together, whether that's just scheduling some time to take a walk together or to do something special. I do think, having that intentional family time scheduled, planned out ahead of time is super helpful, because then it's something to look forward to even as you kind of go about your day. I do think just taking some time, especially for students, away from technology, whether it's a couple hours a day or kind of just trying to figure out how to balance that, is really, really important, because they are already on school all day on their computers. So I know it's different to be on your school computer and do schoolwork and be at home and be on YouTube or something, but you should definitely try to figure out how to limit that and take some time away from that, because that definitely can cause, stress, anxiety, worry, and just overall not be super healthy. And I do think, spiritually trying to help students or kids connect with God, checking in with them, maybe doing something together as a family, whatever that looks like, really trying to help students and your children really connect to God in this time, I think is so important. because hopefully some of those habits will continue on even after the pandemic is over. So those would be my few suggestions, and just connecting to community too, especially for students on Sunday nights. Like, we would love to connect in small groups together. It's another community of people to support a student and another caring adult. So stay connected and try to be intentional would be my kind of recommendation.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, I think you hit on it a little bit, but the screen time has always been, especially for parents of younger kids, how much screen time is a good idea and what do we do about screen time? And now here we are thrown into a position where we have to do screens for the majority of a day. But the truth of the matter is still out there in terms of the screen time and how it can be detrimental. It can affect your sleep patterns. It can affect, anxiety and depression levels and everything like that. It's just one of those areas that already is a little bit touchy. So how do we now manage that? I think that what you said is perfect. Even just breaking up the day, like they're usually in school for 6 hours with a recess maybe or something like that. But now maybe it's even better to say, hey, you're going to do a half hour, 45 minutes of something, and then you're off the screen, you're outside, you're doing something different, just to give your brain and your eyes a break from that. But at the same time, you can use some of the technology is great because you can use it for there's things like Go Noodle or other videos, workout stuff to do that the kids can get a brain break, do something fun and active. Even just the other day, our kids did something where it was really ridiculous. It was like fast speed walking around the house, but go and touch a fork and then go touch the door or, just things like that. And they loved it. I'm like watching them like, why is this fun? But, just things like that actually bring out more of this fun and creativity and, they're getting movement. And then it's like, stop and do 3 or 4 push-ups and then do the next thing. So yeah, I mean, I think those healthy restrictions, what are reasonable when it comes to screen time and already making a plan, I think is important. Because if we're not going to think ahead, we're not going to be ready for when life does open up. So, getting that discipline a little bit in terms of screen, in terms of devotions and walking with the Lord, what does that look like? What can we do now? And then implement. But then a huge thing that I think needs to be on everyone's thoughts has to do with what can we learn now that can be applied? So do we really need to have every child in a sport for every season? Or do we need to do everything that caused us to be running around like we used to? I think one of the things I heard a mom say was, yeah, this is amazing. We get dinner at the table every night. Something we've never really had. Maybe once in a while we got that, and so really making an intentional investment to say, this is important. God gave us this opportunity to slow down. How am I going to take that and apply it in the future? And Mary, do you have any other ideas?
Well, I was thinking too for adults, we are now with our kids all day, every day, all day. And so you have got to, as the adults in the relationship, find some time to just be alone, to have adult conversation, to kind of process some of the things, because the last thing you want to do is process everything in front of your kids or with your kids. There are some things that they need to be invited in and some things they really don't have any business being a part of. So make sure that you're finding time for the two of you. And if you're a single parent, make sure that you are touching base with your small group or connecting with another single parent or even other parents to just work through, just help me process this. I'm like, I've had enough of it. And I think that's really super important. And it's Andrew talked about thinking now about the patterns that we're setting. We know we've created some habits and we're going to have to break those. But then there are some habits that we've created out of necessity that we're going to want to keep moving forward. And so how do you incorporate that? And maybe include the whole family in saying, this has been really fun. How can we find ways to always do this so that it's you're a team together working through this. Those are super important. I think from a mom's perspective, the meal making. Now, my kids were all grown and gone, and one came back, and they love my cooking, right? I pay them to say that. But I found that I have to be doing that more. And right now we know that some people have lost their jobs. It's finances are just really tight now. And there's a really great website, leannebrown.com. And her focus is making really good meals cheap. So, like on $4 a day, how can you eat really good meals? And it might give you some ideas. It might this might be a good time to start developing a new hobby, something you guys could all do together as a family, or something you just want to do. I'm trying to revive my painting because I have many half-started paintings that I need to get back to. But to find something so that you are finding a place where there's a spark of joy that comes out, and it has nothing to do with being sequestered. It has nothing to do with work. It has nothing to do with home stuff. It's just a moment of joy for you. So I think if we can really try to do that, it goes back to the beginning when I said, look at it not as an interruption, but as an invitation. So what are you going to invite yourself to try or to do differently as we get ready to hopefully move out of this?
Yep. I think that is the key to all of this. It's an interesting time because it's time. We all have now this interesting way to handle something that we've always wanted. We always say, right? We're always too busy and we don't have enough time. And I think God gave that very much like a gift to us, whether we wanted it or not. And the question will be, what do we do with that time? And how are we going to develop those relationships? I think that's huge. Like Frank said, both the relationships in our household, but also the community. Like we can still be investing. You can text, you can call. There's definitely ways to stay connected. And in reality, that's even being more intentional, because before you could run into somebody. You could run into somebody at church. You can say hi and chat. Now you're taking that extra step and saying, I really do care. I am praying for you. Those kinds of things to stay connected. So the building of the relationships, developing those healthy habits now, and really, hopefully, even though this is a pressure cooker time, to be able to still think about conflict and resolution and compromise and how do we work together as a family to develop your family culture. I think this is a golden opportunity to say, our family doesn't do whatever, and we are going to be a family that loves one another. And here's just little things. And even when a teenager balks at the idea, I think that that's showing them that we as parents and adults do care about this. We have a heart to see them grow up in the Lord. And, here's what it looks like as a Christian parent to grow our children up in them.
Yeah.
And that just concludes with, I love the Deuteronomy verse, and it talks about love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul. But then it goes on to say, and the words I command you today, you shall have on your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children as you talk with them, as you sit at your house, and when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. That's just like, here's that time. We used to just be like, well, we never see each other, so how am I going to take that time to talk to my child about the Lord or things like that? And here you really are, sitting in the house. We are rising up together. All of these things are now an opportunity for us to do that. And again, I think it's good. We will try to have all of these resources available, like Christian Counseling and Education Foundation. Again, their website is a great resource and tool for just people who have, want ideas or understanding. They talk about even anxiety and fear and how, it is not a sin that you have to address necessarily in that way, but how do you still work through your fears and anxieties? They have tools even for parenting, for tips. Mary mentioned a lot about different other places that have, just resources that we want to provide. We will have that somehow available for everyone. So we just want to thank you for this time. We're going to close now and just pray for each of those groups, for the parents, for you as parents, that you will be equipped, but also for your students, for your children in the midst of this time. So join us in prayer. Mary, would you lead us first?
Sure, absolutely. Lord, we know that your word says to us in the Psalms that you are our refuge and our strength, that you are a very present help in time of trouble. And so we will not fear, regardless of the circumstances. And we know, Lord, that we are in a time right now where so much is unknown. And so we just want to rest our our worry, to lay it in your hands, because you are the God who promises to be with us every step of the way. So, Lord, we pray for all the adults that are listening to this, that they would find their rest in you, that they would seek, as we talked about, to see this as an invitation to a time where they get to both look at themselves in a mirror and to recognize that you desire a lot for them, that you want to guide and direct their lives, and that you do want us to be a people without fear because of our trust and our security in knowing you. So we pray for just all the adults, Lord. Give them everything that they need. Help them to delight in the fact that children are a heritage from the Lord, and you have placed them in a position where they get to speak into the lives of our future. So be with them, equip them, strengthen them. In your name I pray.
God, we just thank you for this time to chat, God, and we know that none of us knew that this was going to happen, God, but it was you knew, God, and this time I just pray we would see as an opportunity, especially to really develop some healthy habits, God. I just do pray that we could connect more, that we could grow more together, God, and that you would just guide our conversations and just give us abounding grace, God, in this time, whether as children or students with their parents or parents with their students, God. I just pray that we would have open hearts and that we would be able to be graceful to one another, God. And I just pray that, especially for your parents, God, that you would encourage them, that you would strengthen them in this time, God, and you would just be able to allow us to lean on each other when we don't know things, or we have a question, or we need prayer, God, that we would find the community, our community, to really rally around us, God, because this is challenging for everyone. And I just pray that more than anything else, God, we would seek you out, seek out your wisdom, seek out your word, God, and that you would guide our hearts and strengthen us and give us that peace that passes all understanding in the midst of chaos, God. But just give us great wisdom and strength, especially in this time.
Holy God, Father, you're amazing and awesome, and you understand what it's like to have children. We are your children, Lord, and we are your children that you have invested in and loved and poured out into, and yet we as adults even have those rebellious feelings, and we turn away from you, and yet you don't give up. You don't stop pursuing us. And Lord, you understand how difficult parenting is, and Lord, even in the normal circumstances of life, when things are going well, parenting is hard. And we just acknowledge that we want to do what we can to raise our children in you. We want to provide this stability for them. We want to provide the opportunities for them. But help us, Father, to know that we can't do it all. We need to rely on you. We need to rely on your Spirit to be able to do this. And especially during this time when we are in like a pressure cooker. Help us just to admit to that, Lord, and help us to recognize those times when we do get even more frustrated than we may normally get because we are just in this confinement, this feeling of isolation. Lord, help us to develop those good habits. Help us to also build relationships with our children, pursuing them, asking them good questions, making life fun even in the midst of this, and to really show them our own hearts that, yes, we may be struggling. We may have some doubts or fears, but we are able to find joy in the midst of this time. We are able to find hope. We are able to be at peace. And it's only because of your Spirit and also because of the community you give us. And so we do pray, Father, I pray that the parents would be able to form deeper relationships with others, that we would recognize the network that we have together to be able to support one another. And when we are getting frustrated, that we take those steps to be able to either reach out to someone or just kind of take a breather, take a walk, do those things that would help us personally. And then we do pray, Father, for the children. Lord, my heart goes out to all the kids who are experiencing loss. Lord, they're grieving and they're experiencing this time in a different way. Help them to process it, Lord, even in their young minds. Lord, we think of the teenagers who have been missing out on some of the key events in their life, as well as the younger children who are missing out on some of their friendships and things at school that are so part of their life. And Lord, help us to know how to help them. Help us to guide them and direct them and point them to you. Lord, thank you for this time, and we thank you that you are the one who gives us the opportunity to even do this. And we just pray a blessing on this message, that the parents who listen to this will be encouraged and blessed. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you all for joining us. And again, if you have any questions or you want us to expound on anything, or if you have other thoughts or concerns that you think we didn't address, we would love to do that. We would probably want to do it in a way that would help you the best. So if you email us, probably I can be the one, Andrew P. at covenantdoylestown.org. That would be my email address. You can shoot me an email anytime and bring up some questions you have, either things that you feel like we need to just elaborate on, even maybe some ideas that you've used at your household. Anything that you want, just to kind of give us an opportunity maybe in the future to come back, maybe give a Q&A time where we can address some of these thoughts and concerns or questions. But we just want to make sure that you know that we are here for you guys. We want to be a resource as pastors, as people in charge of the church, and working with you to come alongside you during this time, and of course point you to other resources as we can. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll sign off.